Hello everyone and welcome to my class. I hope that you had a great Thanksgiving break and you're excited for the final weeks of the semester for Christmas break. Yeah, and thank you for coming to my class. I'm really excited that you get to hear a little bit about my issue. So today we're going to talk about an issue in education that is very important for us to be aware of and to take some precautions as we develop our careers in teaching. Before we begin, if you have any questions whatsoever at any time, please go to Twitter and use the hashtag issues302 with your question, or you can find me on Facebook, Pam Mora, M-O-U-R-A, and send me a message, or you can email me pbm5@students.calvin.edu. Very simple. I'll answer your question promptly, and yeah, I'm excited to mingle with you guys. So I want you to think about your eating experience this semester. Try to remember how many students in your classroom were qualified as special education students. Great. Now, I want you to try to remember if any of those students who are categorized as special education to be some kind of a minority, either a different ethnicity or poverty level. How many of them? Great. So the issue for this class, just keep that in your mind. The issue for this class is called Misinterpreting Minorities and Poverty Students in Special Education. As an overview, there has been a lot of research that has found that many minorities, students, and students who live in poverty are at a higher risk of being identified as a special education student or a student who needs extra attention, when sometimes these students are completely fine in a general education class. They just need that extra little push. And that's the teacher's responsibility to understand where the student is coming from and where the students are at their life in order to judge that. The teacher is the number one person that sees a student struggling with anything, and they have to report or make a referral to schools administrators and psychologists and such to place that student in special education. So you play a vital part in helping these students exceed wherever they're at. Of course, we're going to talk this about more in detail. Since we're just getting to the surface of the issue, I'll just explain these two issues and then we'll get going on those. So the first issue is that students of minority have been placed more often in special education classrooms than Caucasian students. An author called Forness, he did a work with his buddies in 2002. He found that African American males are 11 times more likely to be identified with emotional disturbance, in which is classified as a special education by schools who have more than 90% Caucasian students. That's a huge number, isn't it? Yeah. Also, the Department of Education reported that in the 1998 and 1999 school year, African Americans were 2.9 times more likely as white students to be labeled mentally retarded, 1.9 times more likely to be labeled emotionally disturbed, and 1.3 times more likely to be labeled as having learning a disability. That's crazy. That's a huge number for African American students compared to Caucasian students. So oftentimes, teachers have the misconceptions that African American students or any student in any different minority are the ones to misbehave more often or the ones to have more bad attitudes, you could say. When sometimes in all reality, it might not be how they act, and it might be how they act in their home, or it could be acceptable where they live. it doesn't mean that the student has a certain disability necessarily. So knowing how to distinguish such behaviors requires knowing the student's home life and where they're at. This allows us as the teachers to know their parents and what their cultures are like, which might be very different than ours. It's a very important key for us to know. That was the first issue. Now the second issue is claiming that the children in poverty are 2 to 3 times more likely to be placed in special education. This was a research done by Costello in 2003 with his buddies, like I said before. Forness, which is another author, he suggests that certain structural characteristics of low-income neighborhoods, such as concentrated disadvantage neighborhoods, may be responsible for higher risk students, perhaps more so than socioeconomic status. This basically says that it might not be necessarily a poverty level, but it might be because of the disadvantaged neighborhoods that students may be living in. But it does also account that poverty level and their socioeconomic status. It has also been shown that the students that are in special education classes are not meant to be there. And those students show no signs of having difficulty with learning material or being emotionally disturbed. It's just who they are. Those attitudes and behaviors that some teachers may consider bad behaviors or anything like that might be just because of the cultural difference. And teachers are mislabeling these students when they're just fine. So now that you heard both issues, I want you to pause this video, click on the link, the Google Drive link that I posted, to answer some questions. There's 3 simple questions, shouldn't take you a lot of time. Then please come back and we can resume the class that we're having right now. Thanks. Thank you for coming back. Really appreciate it. I can't wait to hear your responses. So as you might have noticed, like I said before, there are times that teachers, school administrators fail to see what is the real reason why students act or have difficulties the way they do. As teachers, you and I, it's important to expect that we're going to have students who are less than perfect, just like us. We don't know everything, and our students are there to learn and to be who they are and developed themselves into adults. And some students may be squirrely, others may be super quiet and shy, and some might be what you would call disrespectful or behaving badly. As a variety of attitudes and backgrounds come into your classrooms, we might assume that that squirrely child or that child that's too shy or misbehaves a lot may have some sort of emotional, cognitive, or some other kind of disability. Teachers are often quick to assume that these students have extra or need extra assistance. This may be true in some occasions. Not saying that it's not true all the time. There are some times that you might have to give those students an IEP or refer that student to a psychologist or that school administrator that will probably place them in a special education classroom. That's not always true. So that's when we come in. Jackson in 2010, she mentioned that it is vital for teachers to be aware of their students' currencies in order to see the reason of why they're behaving the way they are at that moment or season in their lives. It's important to find a common ground in between you and the student that helps them learn and allow them to be who they are while they're learning. That common ground is a very important key in a learning community, and key is communication. It's very important to communicate between home and the classroom to make your students' learning more effective. And that's when we come in. The students are not going to come up to you and tell you their entire life stories or how home is like. Sometimes they might, but that's our responsibility as teachers to really dig in and know where our students are coming from. Like I said, as a future teacher, get to know the students as best as you can before making any special education referrals. At times, like I said, you might have to do that for students who are really struggling in your classroom, but it might not be necessarily because they are a minority, but because they might actually need this service. So before making any assumption, get to know your students so we won't have this mislabeling and culture misunderstanding of each other. I thank you for attending my class, and now I'm going to assign you just a little assignment for you. So I would like you to answer this question. You ready? What are some ways that in the future you will misjudge or you may properly judge a student's behavior? You may answer this with the little voice thing on the voice thread, or you may create a response video to me. That's fine. I'm excited. So yeah, I would just like you to respond in those ways for me. And I'm excited to hear it. Thank you so much for attending my classroom, and I'll see you in class soon. See ya.